have to start with the NFL draft. This was probably started round 1 on Thursday, then round 2, 3 Friday. It continued to carry throughout this entire weekend. This was probably the most exhilarating NFL draft that I have personally ever experienced firsthand. I think because of the unpredictability and the unpredictable nature of not only the draft, but especially this season, because there wasn't any footage. There was limited tape, limited competition. The GMs, executives didn't have as many opportunities to really interview guys. Everything was virtual, no in-person meetings. You had to simply rely on the pro day and all virtual interviews. That was it. But this is the one time of the year, and I would argue the one sports event in the season where every single team has this newfound hope to start the year. It's the only sport where even if you're absolutely atrocious, the rebuild can happen so quickly, literally in one season, that as you approach the NFL draft, every single team has this newfound belief that we can make a run this year. This one guy is the one missing piece. And that's what I love. It's that level of hope that infuses every single team, that energizes every single team coming into this draft. But with that being said, as always, every year you have certain unexpected trades. You have certain teams that make baffling draft picks. And for me, here are some of my great picks that I thought and some picks that I thought were a little bit questionable. Now, the best pick in the NFL draft this year, hands down, the Chicago Bears drafting Justin Fields. This was absolutely a monumental trade up. They were at 20. They moved up to pick number 11 to draft, in my mind, the guy who was the second best overall prospect in the NFL draft this year. I have said from day one, I am a huge believer in Justin Fields. It was mind-boggling to me, all the criticism that was being heaped in his direction. And let's think about a Bears organization that has literally never had a star quarterback in their history. Jim McMahon is the closest thing to a star quarterback in the Bears history because he was the quarterback on the Super Bowl winning Bears roster in 1985 with that elite defense. But it was the defense that overshadowed his actual contributions on the offensive side. Outside of that, you're looking at Jay Cutler, Sid Luckman, John Harbaugh, and then Jim McMahon as your four leading passers in Bears history. And I'm going to be going out on a limb right here, but I'm going to say Justin Fields will go down as the greatest quarterback in the Chicago Bears history. This guy is absolutely spectacular. I firmly believe it. And this is a reclamation project. Ryan Pace, the GM, Matt Nagy, they understand they whiffed a couple years ago, 4 years ago, especially Ryan Pace, when they moved up from number 3 to number 2 to draft Mitchell Trubisky. They passed up on Patrick Mahomes. They passed up on Deshaun Watson. This was their opportunity to rectify that situation. And I think they absolutely nailed it, especially the fact that he's coming in as the number 11th pick, not even the number 1 or the number 2 pick. It was absolutely monumental for their program. And now they've got something to cheer about because you pair Justin Fields with an elite wide receiver, number 1 type of wide receiving talent in Allen Robinson. Darnell Mooney is still there. The defense is still elite. I think that this can be a playoff team. And I haven't even gone into my prognostications about which teams I think will make the playoffs. But given the added 7th team for the wild card, I could totally see the Chicago Bears making the playoffs exclusively because of this pick right here. This was absolutely huge. The 49ers finally came to their senses, and they drafted the right guy. They drafted Trey Lance. I was a little bit concerned for them that they were going to draft Mac Jones. That was really a lose-lose situation because with Mac Jones, either your fan base is disgruntled and everyone has these low expectations, almost praying he doesn't fail as opposed to being excited for him to potentially succeed. So they came to their senses. And the reality is, with Jimmy Garoppolo still there, if you were to draft Mac Jones, you would essentially have to trade away Jimmy Garoppolo because you're saying Mac Jones is ready to play right now. But with Lance, you can buy yourself a little bit more time to let him develop and see what type of skill sets he has, what type of talent he is. Jimmy Garoppolo is still 22-8 as a starter with the 49ers, 24-8 as a starter overall in his career. So this was a major pickup for them. I thought they ultimately made the right choice. I thought the LA Chargers had a fantastic draft. Rashawn Slater, the fact that he slid all the way to number 13. The Chargers, according to Pro Football Focus, rated the worst offensive line last season. And you put in a guy in Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern who can plug up that left tackle position and absolutely just kind of buttress that offensive line and protect Justin Herbert. That was a huge pickup. Asante Samuel Jr. for them, the cornerback, the son of the former NFL player, Asante Samuel Sr. So the Chargers had a fantastic draft. I thought they made some really excellent picks. The Jets, say what you want about Zach Wilson. I wasn't a believer in Zach Wilson, but I don't even think they had a great draft because of him. The reason why I believe the Jets had a good draft, Elijah Vera Tucker, you trade up for to pair him with Mekhi Becton, again, to fortify that offensive line. And Elijah Moore, the wide receiver that they took in the top of the second round, this is a guy who had the second most receiving yards in the NCAA last year. In fact, he averaged the most receiving yards per game in college football last year. This wide receiver out of Ole Miss. And that's how deep this wide receiving class was. And the fact that the Jets identified him and took him in the second round, the fact that he didn't go in the first round speaks volumes. And I have to give them credit because he is another weapon for Zach Wilson. This guy, I think Elijah Moore will be absolutely fantastic. And then again, so you're fortifying that offensive line. You've got potentially a franchise quarterback. You help him out by bringing in another talented wide receiver. So I like the moves that they were doing. The Vikings, the fact that they were able to draft Christian Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech late in the first round. They didn't even have to move up for him. The Cowboys somehow landed their hands on Micah Parsons, who by all accounts was rated the number one defensive prospect in the NFL last year, or out of college football, rather. So they made tremendous moves. The Patriots, of course, Bill Belichick stuff, drafting Mac Jones. The fact they didn't have to move up for him. And then again, I mean, they got Christian Barmore, the 38th overall pick in the second round, who by all accounts, by a lot of metrics, had him rated the 12th best overall prospect potentially. I loved what those teams did. They did an absolutely fantastic job. But here are the teams that I thought made some questionable decisions. The Carolina Panthers, they decided to draft cornerback J.C. Horn. Now, I like J.C. Horn. I see the appeal. I see the upside potential with this guy. But if we look at the Carolina Panthers, their biggest need was, again, to solidify that offensive line. And the fact that they passed up on Rashawn Slater, to me, was a huge mistake. Sam Darnold, the reason why he struggled in New York was not for a dearth of weapons, to many people's surprise. It was actually because of the porous offensive line. He had no time to throw the football. And that's why the Jets struggled so much with him. They could not protect him. And so if you're the Carolina Panthers, I'm surprised they did not want to sign a guy or draft a guy in Rashawn Slater to help patch that up. So to me, that was a surprise. The Bengals, while I understand why they drafted Jamar Chase to pair him up and reunite him with Joe Burrow, the two of them, of course, had tremendous rapport at LSU during their championship season in 2019. But the Bengals had also a terrible offensive line last year. They gave up the fifth most sacks last year. In fact, Joe Burrow was sacked 32 times last year, which at the time was one of the tops in the NFL. He ended up finishing 11th as the most sacked quarterback in the NFL for top 11, and he didn't even play the final 6 games of the season. So I understand why they wanted to reunite them, but I thought they should have drafted Penei Sewell. Penei Sewell is the guy who absolutely would have been a huge upgrade for them at that left tackle position, or you could really play him anywhere on the offensive line. So I was a little bit shook by that decision to not draft Penei Sewell. The Miami Dolphins, I'm not sure why they drafted Jalen Waddle. I thought if Penei Sewell wasn't taken from the Bengals, by the Bengals rather, then they should have drafted him. Again, I understand Jalen Waddle is a good talent at number 6, but you've got Devontae Parker, you've got Will Fuller, you've got Mike Gesicki. I didn't think that another wide receiver was necessarily the piece that they were missing. So to me, that was a little bit questionable. And then, of course, the Packers, as we could all expect, did not draft a wide receiver. They decided to draft a cornerback, Eric Stokes, out of Georgia. Wish him the best of luck. That is an area of need to complement Jair Alexander. But again, you further piss off Aaron Rodgers, and I'll get into that situation in a moment. To me, those are my kind of big takeaways as far as the picks that I liked, the picks that I didn't like. Let's see, Youngeen TY. Look, I get teams didn't want a linebacker this year, but Parsons and Bolton were the best 2 pure linebackers in the draft. I think that's a great comment. I absolutely think that's a great comment. And if we look at, and thank you for the comment, I think that when you look at teams that had the most success, think about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Devin White was a huge reason behind their success. He's a linebacker. You need those guys that can defend against the run, that can be dual threats, defend against the run, get pressure on opposing quarterbacks, can drop back in coverage. They're just as fast as some of these wide receivers and some of these running backs. So Micah Parsons, the Cowboys just happened to land on him, and I thought that was a major pickup for them.